it does seem that on both sides of the aisle, you're going to get a much warmer welcome in Washington after this November. Does one candidate's stance or the others seem more attractive to you?
I think both candidates are actually coming to the table for different reasons, but they are in fact coming to the table. And I think that that is a change, particularly with this election. And I think that that is happening because there are so many Americans, 52 million Americans, who actually care about crypto. And there are people who have joined standwithcrypto.org. There are 1.45 million people who've signed up who say they want to vote for candidates who are pro-crypto. I think that's what's bringing both Vice President Harris and President Trump to the table.
What do you think, though, about his, full-scale conversion? President Trump previously said Bitcoin was a scam. Now he goes to crypto conferences and claims that he's going to make America the #1 home of crypto innovation and creation. I mean, we are kind of that already, right? But is that a more secure message for the industry?
I think it's a message actually that resonates on both sides of the aisle. I do think Trump has embraced it. And I think that that was a ground shift when he identified that we needed to keep innovation here in America. We needed to be competitive. We needed to make sure that Bitcoin was available and that people could self-custody their own assets. That was a big moment, I think, for the industry. And I do think, though, on both sides, Democrats, Republicans, we saw it in Congress with a vote earlier this year where everybody that voted for that bill said it's important to have rules of the road because that is going to keep us competitive in this global economy. So I do think Trump has had a big impact, but I think that there are many, many Democrats who also see it for the same reason. It's important to have competitiveness. It's important to have the prevalence of the U.S. dollar. It's important to make sure that our innovators can continue to stay onshore. And frankly, that we keep it safe onshore. The worst thing we can do is push these overseas into industries and different places where there are no regulations. So I really think having everybody come to the table is a shift from what we saw even a year ago.
So you actually want regulation, and we've been hearing this from the crypto crowd for a couple of years now. You need some kind of regulation in order to build a really legitimate industry. You also mentioned the U.S. dollar. Do you need the prevalence of the U.S. dollar to continue?
Well, I think if you look at things like stablecoins, right, those are actually pegged to the U.S. dollar. And it's important as we think about that being the global reserve currency that we actually continue to do that and we embrace stablecoins here in the U.S. And in order to do that, you need to have a set of ground rules. And that's where I think where it's the Treasury, the Federal Reserve, Congress, the White House, everybody needs to come together to determine what those rules of the road look like. That doesn't mean a central bank digital currency. That means rules of the road for how we hold those types of assets, how we leverage those type of assets, how we use those to pay. I heard the earlier spot about using Bitcoin to pay. Ultimately, you're going to need to be able to transfer these for value, for payment systems. And that's where I think some of these other assets really come into play.
What are the most transactional coins out there? Because clearly you're not going to use Bitcoin to buy stuff right now. We were talking to Michael Saylor a couple of weeks ago, and he said, no way, Jose. You borrow dollar against your Bitcoin holding and then spend the dollar. What are the tokens that you see people actually using for daily life?
So I think it's actually really starting to emerge. And this is, we often talk about use cases and utility. And so when you think about payment systems, that's where I do think stable coins are really going to move the way we transact. But there are other assets that I think are going to improve the way we transact in other parts of our life, whether it's NFTs and thinking about music, concert tickets, or if we're thinking about holding your ID on your phone, if you're thinking about ways to validate who you are on the internet. All of those they all hold value. So it's going to be different assets and how we transact in that value. That doesn't necessarily mean it's just the U.S. dollar.
Kara, we always focus, obviously, on the presidential race on the top of the ticket, but there are down ballot races that are very important to policy as well. What are you focused on at Coinbase? Where are you spending your lobbying dollars?
Yeah, so we are 100% focused on ensuring that one, we help educate lawmakers who are in office today about why crypto is important, about why their constituents care about it, about the thousands and thousands of developers and builders who are here in their districts who want to create jobs and who want to engage. And so that's our first part of the job, is the educational component. The second part is helping our constituents and helping all the different crypto users out there know who their candidates are, know who their members of Congress are, know who their local officials are. And that's one of the reasons why I think Coinbase has been so interested about a year ago ago, Stand With Crypto launched here in the United States. It launched with Stand With Crypto Day last September. And now, 12 months later, we went from about 20,000 people to 1.45 million people who have signed up. And they're going to standwithcrypto.org to learn about their candidates. There's a scorecard. There are thousands of candidates in all the different elections. Hundreds of those have filled out a questionnaire that says where they stand on crypto policy. And then importantly, there's standwithcrypto.org/vote. And I'll give my call to action to everybody to go learn where you can go to your polling place, learn about your candidates, learn when and how to vote, early voting. I think that's what we're trying to do is kind of the second half of this is trying to help make sure that, organizations like Stand With Crypto really can connect with those constituencies, those 52 million Americans who own crypto.